Assalamu alaikum Hazrat, welcome back to the 386th episode of Thought Behind Things. Today is the 29th of November 2023 और आज हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं एक बहुत ही ख़ास मेहमान जाफ़र हुसैन साहब, who is the founder and CEO of Poster My Wall. इनको बुलाने का मकसद ये था कि he was able to build ए प्रोडक्ट कंपनी इन पाकिस्तान. हम बड़ी दफ़ा बात करते हैं स्टार्टअप्स की. हम जब भी सोचते हैं बिज़नेस स्टार्टअप तो ऐसा बिज़नेस होता है जो कि हम पाकिस्तान में बना के पाकिस्तानियों को बेच के रुपीज़ में बिज़नेस करते हैं, जो कि एज मोस्ट ऑफ यू नो आई हैव बीन अ लॉन्ग क्रिटिक ऑफ डूइंग मोर एंड मोर कंजम्पशन बिजनेस इन पाकिस्तान. इट डजंट डू मच फॉर द कंट्री. लेकिन इन्होंने पाकिस्तान से बैठ के एक ऐसी प्रोडक्ट बनाई जिसको इस वक्त 2 मिलियन पीपल यूज़ एवरी मंथ, एक्सक्लूसिवली बेस्ड आउट ऑफ पाकिस्तान. Almost 42 employees, all Pakistani, all based here. इस कॉन्वर्जेशन में हमने उनकी जर्नी के बारे में भी डिस्कशन की और साथ ही समझा कि हाउ डज़ वन गो अबाउट बिल्डिंग ए स्केलेबल इंटरनेशनल प्रोडक्ट फॉर द ग्लोबल ऑडियंस, क्योंकि आजकल डिजिटल का ज़माना है और इस डिजिटल के ज़माने में आप पाकिस्तान से बैठ के पूरी दुनिया में थियोरेटिकली बिजनेस कर सकते हैं, पैसे कमा सकते हैं. एंड वी नीड मोर एंड मोर ऑफ दी स्टोरीज टू कम अप ताकि पाकिस्तान में फाइनली जो हमारा डॉलर का क्राइसिस है वो ख़त्म हो एंड वी कैन बिगिन टू मेक आवर प्लेस इन द ग्लोबल इकॉनमी. अगर आप चैनल पर नए हैं तो चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करना मत भूलिएगा. अगर आप पुराने हैं तो वीडियो को लाइक करना मत भूलिएगा. अगर आपके कोई थॉट्स हैं तो कॉमेंट सेक्शन में ज़रूर आके बताएं. आई रीड ऑल ऑफ द कॉमेंट्स एंड इट रियली हेल्प्स मी improve the quality of the conversation. Overseas Pakistanis can help support the channel by following the Stripe link down below. It will help us remain independent for as long as possible. But anyways, here is Jaafar Hussain on TBT Go, Lahore Studio. Jaafar bhai, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Welcome to Lahore.
Thank you. Welcome to TBT.
Thank you.
मुझे ये बताएं, just to start the conversation, where were you born and early life आपने कहाँ पे गुजारी?
So born and bred in Lahore. Spent most of my life here.
Right. मुझे बताएं, where did you go to school?
So I went like to Beacon House. I've been, a proud Beaconite all my life. End to end. मेरे बच्चे भी बीकन हाउस में ही जा रहे हैं.
ज़बरदस्त. कौन से कैंपस में थे आप?
सो उस टाइम पे जो पर्पस बिल्ट कैंपसेस इतने ज़्यादा नहीं थे. सो आई थिंक प्राइवेट स्कूल्स वर गोइंग थ्रू दैट लाइक ट्रांजिशन ऑफ लाइक मूविंग फ्रॉम रियली ओल्ड लार्ज हाउसेस. उनके अंदर जो कैंपसेस बनाए थे इनटू पर्पस बिल्ट. सो आई हैव बीन ऑल ओवर लाहौर. लाइक गुलबर्ग में होता था. फिर लिबर्टी कैंपस नया इनका बना था. सो आई थिंक माई क्लास वॉज वन ऑफ द फर्स्ट देयर. एंड देन फॉर ONA levels I ended up in Garden Town. कलमा चौक उस टाइम पे होता था, उधर एक बहुत बड़ा कैंपस है. सो आई एंडेड अप देयर.
इंटरेस्टिंग. और आपने कौन से ईयर में कंप्लीट किया था A levels अपना?
सो आई गॉट डन विद A levels in 2002. उस टाइम पे अब सारे सब्जेक्ट एक ही दफ़ा इकट्ठे ही देते थे.
राइट. AS-A2 नहीं था.
AS-A2 नहीं था. ऑल 8 courses.
Were you a good student?
Yeah, I got 8 A's.
In O levels?
In O levels, yeah.
And A levels?
And A levels में एक B आया था.
अच्छा.
वो याद है अभी तक.
And you chose to do computer science at the time. Again, this was a different time. I always ask people जिन्होंने 98 से 2005 के दरमियान computer science किया कि भाई क्यों? उस टाइम पे तो generally your cousins or your बड़े would recommend कि जी accounting कर लो, doctory कर लो. But why did you decide to pursue computer science?
Interesting story. मेरे अब्बू के एक दोस्त होते थे. He went to Dubai and got me a toy laptop, educational. Toy था. VTech, एक American company. They make educational toys. So I was in like grade 6 at that time, 10 or 11 years old. So initially I started playing with it. उसमें like question answers or general knowledge वाली like quiz games थी. It also had a programming language called BASIC. उसके अंदर उसका कंपाइलर था. एंड विद द लैपटॉप एक पूरी बुकलेट आई थी ऑफ द सिंटैक्स एंड हाउ टू डू लाइक व्हाट ईच कमांड वाज एंड हाउ टू यूज इट. सो दैट रियली ब्लू माई माइंड. आई गॉट सक्ड इनटू दैट. आई रिमेंबर मेकिंग अ टेक्स्ट बेस्ड cricket game as well and forcing my mom to play it with me. And I made other things in it as well. But उस time पे obviously career के साथ तो मैंने connect नहीं किया था. It was just like 10 or 11. But I understood that as something that I enjoyed.
But that's interesting. 10 or an 11-year-old could understand the fundamentals of programming given the right tool.
Yeah, I mean it's a testament. It's actually a testament to their packaging and educational thing that I look back on it and look at the tools. अब तो information का बहुत ज़्यादा overload है, you know, for like children at any age. But at that time internet भी नहीं था उस तरह जैसे आजकल है. And it was a very, you know, like well-built educational thing.
Yeah, and also particularly the reason why I say that is because even though there is that informational overload today, the way that you build a product really defines how people end up using it, right? So चाहे अब आज बहुत सारे बच्चे हैं, उस टाइम के ऊपर तो you were one in a million जिसके अंकल ने दुबई से एक चीज़ ला दी. आज everybody has the opportunity available on the internet. But nobody is inherently using it. हालांकि अगर उस टाइम पे बंदा इन्विजन करता है, वो कहता है यार एक टाइम अगर आएगा इंटरनेट के ऊपर तो everybody would want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
Do you have kids of your own?
Yeah, 3 kids.
Okay. Have you gotten them into coding or any of?
Yeah, the older 2 are into programming. Abhi to, you know, they're young. They're into block-based programming. The older one is 10. He started doing HTML in school as well. So ab educational institutions are really, you know, improving in this sense as well. But from a young age, I've always exposed them to, you know, like programming concepts, mainly through video games. Right. You know, buying the right video games for them and exposing them.
Is there an example of? I remember there was a tool MIT का जिसमें वो आप blocks करके
Scratch. Yeah. Right. So both of them are taking online Scratch courses. In fact, Lums के NICL का ही startup था. Right. They offer, you know, classes on Zoom. So, you know, they're doing those and yeah, they're really enjoying it. Actually, these tools are so much more better because in my time, खाली 8 लाइनें होती थी और उसमें मुझे अपना आउटपुट नज़र आता था जो मैंने कोड का लिखा होता था.
Right.
But these guys are making animations with audio, they're recording their own audio and dialogues and whatnot. So it's a very visual and fulfilling experience for the kids because as a programmer, जो initial spark आपको होता है ना, because it's you write some code and you make the computer do something.
Yeah.
So the kids these days are, you know, have a much better time.
Do you think beyond, I mean, for a lot of people who are not part of the sort of computer science space, वो कहते हैं यार हमने तो बच्चों को कंप्यूटर साइंटिस्ट नहीं बनाना तो हम क्यों उसको कोडिंग कराएं. मेरा ओपिनियन थोड़ा फ़र्क है. मुझे लगता है कि दिस इज़ नॉट कंप्यूटर साइंस, इज़ फंडामेंटल ऑफ प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग. Do you think, what's your opinion on this? I mean, what sort of things do kids learn when they, you know, utilize tools like Scratch or try to create small programs?
Right. So I think like 2 big things. One is the ability to break down a complex problem into smaller chunks and really understand, you know, the basics or the core thing. And the other is logical thinking. Again, you know, there's no magic. You have to build everything by yourself. Every step is discrete and you have to understand it. तो एक वो discipline मिलता है like सोचने का जो कि I feel पाकिस्तान में वैसे बहुत ज़रूरी है.
It's very interesting. आपने दूसरी वाली चीज़ particularly identify की है. ये वाकई everybody has an idea. Yeah. Nobody has the patience to actually slowly walk and build that. So you graduated in 2002, A-levels,
yeah.
And then what about university? दुनिया भर में टेक्नोलॉजी बहुत इवॉल्व कर चुकी है. अब आप घर बैठे एक मोबाइल फ़ोन से पूरी दुनिया में किसी किस्म की भी डिफरेंट एसेट्स, स्टॉक्स या इवन क्रिप्टो करेंसीज ख़रीद सकते हैं. जहाँ पर ये टेक्नोलॉजिकल एवोल्यूशन आए वहाँ पे भी अनफॉर्चुनेटली हालात ऐसे हैं कि इकॉनमी एक ऐसी जगह पर पहुँची हुई है कि बड़े आजकल बुरे हालात हैं. इन्फ्लेशन बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ रही है, सेविंग्स हमारी डिप्लीट हो रही हैं. ज़्यादातर लोग इन्वेस्टमेंट्स करते ही नहीं हैं और जो करते भी हैं वो 90% लॉसेज अनफॉर्चुनेटली बनाते हैं. इसी प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व कर रहा है Sarmaya.pk, जो कि अपने फाइनेंशियल ट्रेडिंग प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे ट्रेनिंग्स भी ऑफर करता है और डेटा भी ऑफर करता है जिससे आप पूरी दुनिया की मार्केट्स, खासकर पाकिस्तानी मार्केट्स को बआसानी देख सकते हैं. अगर आप लोग अपनी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स और ट्रेडिंग में स्ट्रगल कर रहे हैं तो आई वुड डेफिनेटली अर्ज यू टू चेक आउट Sarmaya फाइनेंशियल्स प्लेटफॉर्म. इट्स अ रिमार्केबल प्लेस जहाँ पर आपको बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग रिपोर्ट्स के थ्रू डेटा भी मिलता है, इन्वेस्टमेंट की एडवाइस भी मिलती है और ख़ासकर उनकी ट्रेनिंग्स जहाँ पर उनके एक्सपर्ट्स जो हैं वो आपको क्रिप्टो और स्टॉक मार्केट और कमोडिटीज़ और एसेट्स के अंदर ट्रेड करके पैसे कमाना सिखाते हैं. सो चेक आउट द प्लेटफॉर्म एंड चेक आउट देयर ट्रेनिंग्स. नाउ बैक टू द पॉडकास्ट.
Yeah, so उस टाइम पे interestingly computer science was something that I wanted to do, but the popular thing उस टाइम पे was computer engineering. So this was this new hardware focused degree. उस टाइम पे telecom का बहुत boom था. So, you know, everyone was telling me that computer engineering is the next big thing. So I started looking for, you know, universities that offered that program. I personally wanted CS, but I wanted to वो फिर peer pressure भी होता है, parents का भी होता है और उस तरह का. So we started looking at GIK, FAST, and LUMS. LUMS was my top priority because of its reputation, and it was walking distance from my place. So that was also a big factor. So I ended up applying at LUMS mainly, or GIK was not an option, although a lot of my friends went there.
Was that a cultural reason or कि भाई इतना दूर
है? Yeah, I mean, एक जगह walking distance है, एक जगह एक और शहर है, so that was a factor as well.
Right.
So I ended up just applying to LUMS. और FAST में apply करने का सोचा था. I got the prospectus and everything, but I was like उस टाइम पे YOLO का concept नहीं होता था, but I was like YOLO, let's go to LUMS and just apply there.
Interesting. LUMS में computer engineering नहीं थी उस टाइम पे?
उस टाइम पे computer engineering थी. It was a very new program. अभी भी ऐसे ही होता है कि साल के एंड पे आपने अपना मेजर डिक्लेयर करना होता है.
Right.
So I enrolled into CE, computer engineering, but by the end of the second semester, end of the first year, I was clear that this is not the thing for me, because I took some hardware courses, I took some signals and systems or those type of courses, and they were very dry and difficult. So I at that time I decided that like CS is the thing for me.
How were the 4 years at LUMS? If you
the 4 years were great. सबसे पहली चीज़ आप O level A level से आ रहे होते हो, and अच्छे scores आपने किए होते हैं. Like LUMS में आके एक reality check मिलता है कि अच्छा, there are so many more accomplished people than me.
Right.
So I remember I took economics. It was a new like subject for me. 101 course लेना होता है. So I took that in my first semester, and in the first few weeks, like my dad pointed out कि पहली दफ़ा इसको पढ़ते हुए देखा है, क्योंकि वो actual workload बहुत ज़्यादा होता है, and you have to research and learn everything on your own. So एक वो जो होता है ना shift from very like prescribed syllabus और वो वाली teaching to an open-ended thing, वो एक difference था, और obviously the level of competition and everything was. So वो एक initial like झटका था. But otherwise it was great. I made good friends who are still good friends, and had a lot of fun.
There were a lot of people from Lahore. I don't know आपके exact batch के थे या आप plus minus 1 year 2 years. Confiz, Texel, a lot of these guys, they're from LUMS as well, computer science. Were they
Confiz के seniors थे.
ठीक है.
जो Texel, Umar Javed. He was an instructor. So
he was an instructor?
Yeah, at that time.
Achha, interesting.
Yeah, he taught us object oriented.
Interesting. Where did most of the folks who were with you end up? Are they in Pakistan?
So the vast majority is outside of Pakistan. And but there is a small minority in Pakistan, some working in tech, some in their own, either in corporates or in their businesses.
So mostly you would say businesses or founders, or some
it's
working as well?
It's a mix. I would say it's an even mix.
Interesting. 2006 में आपने graduate किया.
Yes.
And you graduated were you a good student? Were you
Yeah, I was a decent student. जो graduating GPA था वो 3.5 था, and उस time पे फिर जो आखिरी साल था, I was set on working in the industry because I had done a lot of programming and I enjoyed it and I wanted to build things. So I was set on working in the industry.
Expectation क्या होती थी उस time के ऊपर? Like who were the players in the industry के यार? जिस तरह for economics इस तरह के लोग हैं ना, क्या Engro वाले आएंगे, Unilever आएगा, that's the benchmark of it, और या McKinsey में चले जाएंगे. So computer science या IT tech के अंदर क्या होता था उस time पे?
So उस time पे international hiring was इतनी ज़्यादा नहीं थी जितनी अब होती है. So like Google, Amazon and Microsoft were on the radar, but they only took like 1 or 2 people.
Right.
And they took, like people at the very top usually. So like most people like me didn't even consider that as, as an option.
Yeah.
उस time पे जो बड़े, players in Lahore at least they were Systems, NetSol and TechLogix. Those were the ones I remember. I ended up interviewing at a lot of smaller, setups as well. घरों के अंदर startup, खुले हुए थे. उस time के startups थे, I guess उस time पे startup का तो इतना concept भी नहीं था, funding भी नहीं थी, कुछ भी नहीं था. But there were definitely a lot of decent small companies operating in the space as well. But these three were the big, players.
And you ended up in Technologics.
How
did that happen?
Yeah, so I actually did an internship, while I was at LUMS, at Technologics. I liked them and they liked me, so I had a job before I graduated. I chose Technologics because this time I don't know if that was the impression at that time. Technologics had a very engineering focused culture compared to Net Solar Systems, which were more into customizing their existing product and selling it again. Nothing wrong with that, but I wasn't, and I knew a few people who went there, but I wasn't interested in that. I was more interested in the engineering aspect of it.
Interesting. That particular thought, because a lot of young kids today, when they're looking at careers, they're looking at, okay, what's the biggest name, what's the biggest salary. The way that they envision growth, वो बड़ी different होती है. When you say कि यार मैं engineering पे focus करना चाह रहा था, what was happening in your mind? What were you thinking कि यार अच्छा मैं engineering पे focus करूँगा तो मुझे क्या upside मिलेगी जो कि long term पे शायद मेरे लिए beneficial हो?
I think वो एक passion था for the craft, which led to other things down the road as well. But obviously एक naivety भी थी उस time पे, कि पैसों का इतना नहीं शायद सोचा जितना actual काम का सोचा. And एक और Technologics का एक और भी था because of the work culture. It was popular in our circles as well.
What do you mean by that?
By a culture that is not driven by sales, or by the sales team.
Right.
It's more focused on
quality of the product,
quality of the craft, and a little bit of innovation. जो कि इतनी ज़्यादा तो नहीं थी, but जो भी customers कहते थे.
और ये कर रहे क्या थे? Against hardcore services theme for.
So after I left, there was a big change at Technologics in which I think they started focusing on customizing either a Microsoft or an Oracle product.
Right.
I forget, but at that time it was a lot of service oriented काम, बाहर के startups, बाहर की companies were outsourcing work to them. So I actually did end up working on a team that was outsourcing work for a US startup.
Interesting. And what sort of work were you doing at the time?
So वो जो startup था, that was focused on building photo albums for schools. Schools में हर साल जो एक yearbook होती है और वो होती है. So this was a very different time from today.
Right.
Technology was not what it was. Mobile phones were not a thing. Smartphones were not a thing. So it was very new technology there. So they were focused on digitizing that and selling that as a package or a service to schools. So we were building the technology जो कि photos को layout करती थी in photo books and nicely animate करती थी उसे and everything.
Right. You were how long were you working there for?
So I worked there for a year, a year and a half, as all good LUM students do. And then we usually decide to apply for a master's. तो इसकी भी ये story है कि actually before I graduated, उस time पे एक wave चली कि सारे Fulbright पे apply कर रहे थे, Fulbright के लिए apply कर रहे थे. And I was dead set on working in the industry, but I just applied for the heck of it कि चले सारे apply कर रहे हैं, मैं भी GRE दे के देखता हूँ. उस time पे and now that I look back, उस time पे when I wrote the statement of purpose एक essay होता है, I had no idea what to write. Because I had no idea what impact I could make or what was even going on in the industry.
Right.
But yeah, fast forward 1 year, एक साल हो गया, Fulbright की applications फिर से खुल गई, फिर से एक wave चली कि चलो अब apply कर लेते हैं. And at that time I did, redid the GRE and actually had a better idea of what to write in my statement of purpose now that I had actually worked in the industry. And so I got it. And at that time, once I got it, and at that time on the side, I used to run a blog about programming, about the craft, and about other things as well. And that blog actually was a nice source of job offers. Because again, उस time पे LinkedIn भी इतना नहीं था.
Right.
So I ended up, having conversations with Umar Saif. He at that time had a small startup, a social web plugin type thing. I think it was called Bumpin. I ended up having a conversation and interview with Raza Saeed at Park Wheels at Confiz. But I eventually went to a small startup in Islamabad. Like they were building a web collaborative editing document, software. So I ended up working from home for them, for there after TechLogix.
So I mean, अभी आपका मास्टर्स का फाइनल नहीं हुआ था, and you left TechLogix for this startup.
Yeah.
Why did you leave for after a year and a half?
A year and a half उस time पे Fulbright accept हो गई थी.
अच्छा.
Yeah. So I had that, like thing के I
मुझे core corporate career की requirement नहीं है. I'll go do something interesting with my life for now.
Yeah, so I was like, I will be going off for a master's in 6 to 8 months. Might as well try something, else. Corporate मैंने flavor ले लिया. What is the startup, culture all about?
और ये आप लाहौर से बैठ के कर रहे थे?
मैंने mainly लाहौर से बैठ के काम किया था, but for a few months they rented out, a small house in I-10. I don't know उस time पे क्या था. कोने में था इस्लामाबाद के. एक बंदा उधर होता था जो मैं फ्राई अंडे बना के सुबह देता था और बस फिर हम लाउंज में बैठ के कोडिंग करते थे. सो दैट वाज आल्सो अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग एक्सपीरियंस. 1 महीना या 2 महीने आई रिमेंबर वी डिड दैट. इट वाज अगेन अ वेरी स्मॉल टीम. आई थिंक 3 or 4 people. So that was an interesting experience as well.
And then 6 to 8 months you were off to your masters.
I got married and then
अच्छा. पहले we'll get to that, but before that पहले मुझे ये बताएं, Fulbright, how does that work? You apply for the scholarship first and then apply to universities, or do you?
So first you apply to an area. Computer science मेरा था. And once you get it, then Fulbright helps you get into different universities. They have a certain preference for certain universities. So for example, MIT में घुसना on a Fulbright is fairly difficult.
Okay.
Like Georgia Tech, UIUC, these are easier in the engineering space.
Easier because, I mean, generally they're easier? Or
like Fulbright prefers them,
okay.
I believe for funding reasons or for other reasons as well.
Right.
And so I ended up selecting Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh.
आपने वैसे जनरली अप्लाई कहाँ किया था?
मैंने कार्नेगी मेलन किया था. दैट वाज माय नंबर 1 चॉइस. एंड एज अ बैकअप आई अप्लाइड टू लाइक 2 अदर यूनिवर्सिटीज़. एक जॉर्जिया टेक थी एंड द थर्ड वन आई फॉरगेट. बिकॉज वो आपने अपना लाइक बैलेंस रखना होता है कि एक आपने टॉप टियर पे करना है, एक मिडिल टियर पे करना है और एक बिल्कुल एक सेफ्टी नेट है.
नहीं, सो व्हाई कार्नेगी मेलन?
So Carnegie Mellon is the birthplace of software engineering as a discipline.
अच्छा.
Yeah. So it was funded by the DoD, and the DoD at the very, inception of the internet and software was the biggest vendor of software. So they, so this university actually, created a lot of the processes and tools that are used in everyday industry these days.
Right.
For, collaborative like software engineering at scale. Hundreds of people writing software. It can be very chaotic.
Right.
So like that always interested me, and I was very like industry focused, product focused from the start. I didn't want to go into academia. I didn't want to do research. I wanted to build things that real people used.
Right.
So that was a consideration. Yeah. And the other interesting thing about Carnegie Mellon was that it was at a cross section between art and engineering. So I don't know if you know, but they do a lot of like work for Disney as well, where they have a very old and very mature drama school and art school, and in the same university, and they do a lot of collaboration, like building robots for plays or entertainment and strategies.
Right. And that must be quite fun.
Yeah. That was very interesting.
And so you went in 2008.
Yeah.
And you graduated. You had a job, you seemingly settled, but now you're unsettling yourself. You're going for a master's on a scholarship.
Yeah.
Why decide to get married right before that? That's just taking the anxiety pill. Alternate भी हो सकता है ना कि मैं बस जा रहा हूँ मास्टर्स के लिए 2 साल जैसी I land and I'll get married. What was the thought there?
I think it's a generational thing perhaps. उस टाइम पे पेरेंट्स का ही होता था अगर बच्चा बाहर जा रहा है तो शादी करके भेजो. So I think it was that.
And your wife went with you to the US?
Yes.
How was that? Doing your master? I mean, were either of you working there at the time then? I think आपको तो allowed ही नहीं था.
नहीं, मुझे allowed नहीं था. हाँ, like Fulbright पे यही होता है, even if you work तो they deducted from your stipend.
I see.
And she ended up working like part-time as well at a store. So I think she had a great time there.
How was that experience as a young couple going to the US and not really pursuing the American dream us tarah se, because you're studying and you know this is a timed thing, but still it's exciting, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was like an extended honeymoon for like 16 months there, you know, because like koi strings attached nahi the to the US, so we weren't really thinking of, you know, like putting down roots there or us type ki koi serious life decisions nahi leni thi us time pe.
Right.
So yeah, I was focused on education, she was focused on, you know, her job as well, and we explored, and I have family there as well, so we ended up like traveling and meeting family there as well.
Did you guys do like road trips or go to multiple states or?
नहीं, बहुत extended road trips नहीं थी. We usually just took either a bus or a flight or उस तरह. वो boys वाली road trips नहीं थी.
Interesting. Fulbright के बाद you have to come to Pakistan. Is that a definitive thing? Yeah, you have to be outside of the US, can go anywhere.
So there was this infamous addendum in our batch to the Fulbright agreement. पहले ऐसे होता था where it wasn't required that you had to come back to Pakistan. You could stay abroad. But in our batch, or either in the batch before us, ये addendum हुआ था कि I think it was lax for PhD students, but for master students you had to come back.
अच्छा, ये आप ये नहीं कर सकते US से निकल के आप लेट्स से कनाडा चले जाएं या इंग्लैंड चले जाएं?
नहीं. I actually had a batchmate at CMU who was on the Fulbright from Panama. और उस बंदे ने बहुत जान मारी थी trying to stay in the US somehow. उसने बहुत interviews दिए थे. And that made me think, okay, this is not a Pakistani thing. But he ended up going back as well.
Right. And is that a timed thing कि जी इतने से बाहर ही या बस वापस गए फिर वापस जाकर किसी और राउट से आप आ सकते हैं तो आ जाएं, कोई मसला
नहीं. फिर you have to stay back for master students के लिए for 2 years. So आपने वापस पाकिस्तान में 2 साल spend करने होते हैं and then you can go.
You never went back?
Yeah.
Why not?
I ended up, so before coming back, at that time I didn't know he was my future co-founder, but I met him at TechLogix. And before I was graduating from CMU, he contacted me about an idea that he had,
right,
which is now called Poster My Wall. So, we worked on that idea. I liked it. And, I had always wanted to work on something of my own. So, we ended up...
This person was a client at TechLogix?
At that time, yes. He was on the client side.
Right.
I was on the outsourcing side.
Right.
Yeah.
So, tell me about Poster My Wall. And this is what you still do, right?
yes.
14 years
13, 14 years on. This is what we're still doing. So, Poster My Wall is an online design tool that helps, people make designs and do marketing online and in store as well. So we started off initially as just a design tool. In 2010, if you wanted a poster or any marketing imagery, Photoshop or any of the other desktop applications were your only option. So like we were the only tool at that time where you could, it had easy to use options. Any layperson could make a design and then, download a high resolution file and print it, a 6-foot tall poster. So we started off as that in 2010.
The poster printing and the latter part of that sort of funnel, you guys never touched that. क्योंकि बहुत सारी प्रोडक्ट्स ने ये भी किया ना, उन्होंने उसको इंटीग्रेट कर दिया, चाहे खुद क्या हो चाहे सर्विसेज से इंटीग्रेट कर दिया कि आपने बना लिया पोस्टर तो हम ही आपको, आप इतने पैसे दें, हम आपको प्रिंट करके आपके घर भेज देंगे.
So at launch time we actually did offer that in the US only. Right. So we did partner with a printer that our users could order prints from. But around COVID के बाद या COVID से थोड़ा सा पहले, the world had shifted. Well, not completely, but a lot of marketing had shifted online.
Right.
Since 2010, and we were seeing a decline in interest in print, like products and print marketing as well.
When did you launch this product?
So 2010 में मैं वापस आया, like January 2010 में. उस time पे in the US we had signed the LLC and everything, and I set up a home office in Lahore. And it took me around 6 months to build the first version of the product with the proprietary technology that we built for high resolution output, and then a whole website around it, everything. So we launched in June 2010,
or
yeah. And then we waited for the first sale to happen.
How long did that take?
It took about a few weeks. Yeah. So it's जो initial like startup वाला time होता है, मैं अपनी जो team है उसको ये कहता हूँ कि you guys have joined at the at the easy period.
Yeah.
Like we've gone through the rocky startup phase. So
how did you go about it initially? I mean, were you using sort of Google ads or because I mean आपने एक product बना दी है, एक deep abyss of the ocean of the internet पे फेंक दी है.
Yeah.
How does one come about getting orders there, right?
Yeah. So initially we focused a lot on SEO, making sure that we got as much organic traffic from Google as possible. उसके ऊपर फिर Google ads हमने लगाए. Social media was starting out, so obviously we उस time पे खाली Facebook होता था और Twitter. So we made those profiles. Pinterest भी होता था. So we made those profiles, started blogging. So in the first like year after we launched, I was spending like 70% of my time in writing code, and the 30% was writing blog posts and doing digital marketing. So that was a start. फिर product के अंदर we had like product led growth like type things. KB offered a free download, but the free download had a large watermark saying postermywall.com. That ended up being very valuable at the early stage in bringing like direct word of mouth traffic to the site.
आपने कहा आपने initially एक home office बनाया और उसमें you were working.
Yeah.
How long before you hired your first engineer? I would say.
Yeah. So we hired our first engineer in 2014, 2015 के time पे.
So 4 years you were just building this all on your own.
Yeah. So it was just me for full time. When we launched the first version of the website, my wife was just passing behind my screen and she saw it and she was like, "ये कभी नहीं चलेगा." Like users cannot see their designs or templates. So she like taught herself web design and Photoshop and everything, and she made the second iteration of our website, which we launched. I think I made it in November like 2010. So yeah, she started helping me a lot with the web design and the actual content, because हमने like June में editor तो launch कर दिया, website तो launch कर दी, but we didn't have any content to put on it. No concept of templates. So we needed backgrounds and we needed templates. So like she started doing a lot of the artwork and the templates that would go there. So yeah, it was her. But the first full-time employee came in 2014.
So I mean that was 4 years, and जब बंदा लम से ग्रेजुएट करके कार्नेगी मेलन से ग्रेजुएट करके पाकिस्तान वापस आता है तो आपको लेफ़्ट राइट हर बंदा पुल कर रहा होता है और आवाज़ें डाल रहा होता है कान में कि यार क्या कर रहा है यार, देख ले, पता नहीं चलेगा टाइम ज़ाया कर रहा है टाइप. नो मैटर हाउ मच यू बिलीव इन समथिंग, ठीक है उसमें नंबर्स भी आ रहे होंगे, सारा कुछ आ रहा होगा, बट वन डज सेकंड गेस देमसेल्व्स, राइट, कि यार I mean, am I gonna be 50 years old and sitting alone and trying to build this product? Did you have those moments? Especially COVID, I think really helped. As मतलब मेरा ये था कि मैं जो है ना वो ज़ाहिर है घर से काम कर रहा था. I was in the digital media space and I had my own thing. In the first couple of years, we hadn't hired anyone. एंड सो इवन आप घर से कर रहे हो तो पैसे भी आ रहे थे, लेकिन वो पेरेंट्स भी आपको ना कर रहे होते हैं, अच्छा यार चलो दही ले आओ, वो मामू आए नीचे आके बैठ जाओ, भाई मैं काम कर रहा हूँ. बट वो कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं था कि लाइक घर से बैठ के क्या काम होता है. माई फादर इज़ ऑल्सो अ बैंकर, तो उनको तो ये था कि यार 8 बजे सुबह उठना होता है, जॉब पे जाना होता है, द रूटीन वॉज पैरामाउंट. एंड सो कोविड ने एटलीस्ट ये किया, दे वेंट अब्रॉड टू माई ब्रदर्स एंड दे सॉ कि यार वहाँ पे भी जॉब पेशा लोग जो हैं वो अब घर से होम ऑफिस में काम कर रहे हैं. उससे पहले तो कॉन्सेप्ट ही नहीं था. इन अ लॉट ऑफ वेज पीपल वुड कम एंड जज यू के क्या सीन. डू यू थिंक यू फेस्ड दैट सॉर्ट ऑफ क्वेश्चनिंग योर सेल्फ, करना है नहीं करना, मे बी आई शुड quit this, maybe I should get a job, maybe I should look for other opportunities?
Yeah, so like my dad was a banker as well, and उनको एतराज़ होता था जब टेक्नोलॉजिक्स में जीन्स पहन के जाता था. Where's the suit or at least a dress pant. But coming back to your question, yes, of course, there were dark moments and there was a lot of uncertainty at the start. We even like stopped working on the product for a few months and started picking up services wale products, like services wale projects for, you know, some sort of revenue stream. So us tarah bhi hua tha. But, you know, we were looking at the numbers and they were always encouraging. And well, not always encouraging, but ek tha ki ab, you know, ek risk liya, ek bet liya, so let's at least, you know, see it through for, you know, like 6 more months and 6 more months. Let's see kya hota hai. And yeah, it paid off. Usme ek to factors ye bhi the ke I think my spouse was very supportive in maintaining a discipline of, you know, work is work. So, और मैंने भी बहुत discipline रखा कि मैं, you know, 9 बजे उठता था और बैठता था काम पे, like 9 बजे काम पे बैठता था और 6 बजे या 5 बजे उठ जाता था. So there was that from the start very like clear distinction between work and life. So that helped a lot. And you know, when we had kids, you know, we still maintained that as well. इसीलिए जब COVID हुआ, work from home hua, schooling from home hui, so we were, you know, well prepared because we had a lot of experience in that as well.
Interesting. What do you think was the point where you realized that acha, this is not just an idea that I'm pursuing, this is now a legitimate thing and this can now begin to grow and scale? And like you mentioned, 2014 when you hire your first employee, more often than not, that's when एक जनरल वो तो हो जाता है कि अच्छा जी अब मैंने किसी को तनख्वाह देनी है, अपना तो मैं कर लेता हूँ, कोई मसला नहीं, आज अच्छा महीना कल बुरा महीना. बट हायरिंग समवन इज़ अ बिग डील. It changes the way that now you're looking at that entire thing. What do you think was that inflection point for you guys?
So even at the start, without any employees, since this was entirely bootstrapped, there was that sense of commitment कि, you know, हमने invest किया है. I need to try my best to, you know, make this work. Or, you know, for the first 4 years, I am repeatedly reminded कि कोई vacations नहीं ली मैंने, and, you know, I worked through most public holidays as well. And yeah, hiring people also adds another layer on top of that where you are, you know, like responsible for someone else as well. And it only gets worse as the, you know, that sense of responsibility as the team grows and grows. And so we have had, so the growth was pretty, again, hamari jo growth thi, since we were not a VC-backed startup, a typical hockey stick, Silicon Valley style growth nahi thi. It was very calm and steady and real growth. Like not the sort of hyper growth that you see in startups where, you know, they pump millions into ads.
बहुत सारे आए और फिर एकदम से बहुत सारे चले गए and you
exactly.
just stuck. Sustainable थी उस तरह से बहुत ज़्यादा.
So because, you know, this was our own money and this was, you know, like real money, like that was coming in from customers. From the start, we were very mindful of where to spend it for marketing. So whereas abhi aajkal it's typical to, you know, pump in a few $100,000 into paid ads, we never did that. We always focused on, you know, like getting users in ways that were sustainable and didn't require a lot of, you know, like funding. And those moments and those methods were almost always from within the product. So the first, you know, inflection point that happened in our growth was when, you know, again, हमने editor बना दिया, हमने concept of templates बना दिए. Initially, you know, हम खुद ही templates बनाते थे. Like Sunday magazine होता था, उसमें full page ads आते थे. We would just, you know, open them up and start copying them and making them. But then we decided to crowdsource this. We built a community that let anyone in the world sign up as an artist or a creator on Poster My Wall and make templates and put them up for sale. And then there was this whole royalty wala model around that where, you know, for each download or each sale, the artist would get some royalty as well. So that really helped with the growth of the product because ek humne SEO, ek framework dala hua tha. And we started seeing, you know, designers from Malaysia, from Argentina, from, you know, Europe, making like designs for things that we didn't even know of, like really hyper local holidays or regional events that we hadn't thought of. And you know, like that helped with the growth a lot.
Makes sense. Why didn't you go for VC money? I mean, this is a time period when all you hear is this guy left his job and now he's worth $10 billion type situations. And everybody was salivating over the idea of कि मेरी net worth ऐसी हो जाए, मैं मुझे VC $1 million दे लेकिन 1% लेके तो मैं $100 million की worth बना लूँ, you know. It's very easy to get seduced by that. Was that a conscious decision from you guys कि यार नहीं हमने control नहीं छोड़ना या हमने you know, I don't know, कुछ भी हो सकता है. So what was the thought process behind that?
Yeah, it was a conscious decision. It was about, you know, controlling the product and controlling our lifestyle and, you know, where we wanted to, you know, take the team as well.
Offers आई थी दरमियान में?
No, not at the start. उस टाइम पे जब आप बिल्कुल like छोटे होते हो और user base भी नहीं होती, उस टाइम पे offers नहीं आती. Like they started coming in many years later.
Right, but you never took them?
We never took them because we were happy with the profitability, happy with the growth, and we had a clear vision for where to take the product, and yeah, we didn't need them, frankly.
What's the scale right now, if you have some numbers to share for the product?
Yeah, so overall we have, you know, 20 million users who've used us on a monthly basis. There's like on a given, you know, month, 3 to 4 million users actively using the site. Over 130 million designs have been, you know, made on the site. We also offer marketing features. So more than, I think, 18 million emails have been sent out through our system. 500K like social media posts have been made. And the design community has made over 2 million, you know, templates for everything from a poster to an Instagram post to a TikTok video reel to a business card.
And what's the revenue model?
So back in the day when we started, subscriptions were not a very popular or a very, you know, ubiquitous way. So we started off with the pay-as-you-go model कि आप आते थे site पे, you know, you made a design, आपको high-res download के लिए, you know, like payment करनी पड़ती थी. So for the first 4 or 5 years, it was mainly that. And then we added a subscription model on top of that as well. And now we have a monthly subscription, like 2 tiers. Ek is a basic one, and then another one, more pricier one for, you know, marketing tools as well.
And do you guys, at this point in time, now that you're a profitable, running, comfortable business, do you think you'll go for like an acquisition or an exit, or do you think abhi theek hai, chal raha hai, jaise chal raha hai, we'll see where it goes?
Yeah, at the moment we aren't interested in selling or, you know, an acquisition. We have a clear vision of what we want to achieve, and we're just, you know, focused on that.
Who's the biggest competitor at this point in time?
So interestingly, over the years, we have, you know, I told you, okay, we started off with design, but now we are into the email marketing space. We are in the social media marketing space. So the list of competitors has actually grown over the years. આજકલ, I think the biggest household name that we compete with is Canva, which is an Australian unicorn backed by VCs. So in the design space, and like we compete with them. On the social media side, we compete with tools like Buffer and Hootsuite and Sprout Social. And on the email marketing side, again, we have competitors, Constant Contact and MailChimp.
Does it concern you कि ये जो दूसरी आपके competitors हैं, they're VC backed, unicorn level, question mark तो बंदे के दिमाग में आता है कि यार we're a very niche team of passionate developers and designers and marketeers who've spent many years building this, but on the other side जो machinery है उससे शायद हम compete ही ना कर पाए.
No, it actually excites me, and it's a source of, you know, pride ke, you know, we're a very small team from Pakistan competing with these giants, and that's something that I mentioned to all new hires at, you know, like when they join the team as well, ke bring your A game, because, you know, like look at the landscape in which you're competing. So, you know, it's exciting. And, you know, having a small team has some advantages. We can move in certain spaces much faster, and, you know, given the diverse offering that we have inside one, you know, product, we can create a lot more value under one roof for our user than some of our competitors cannot.
Is your user base largely driven by SEO?
The incoming traffic, yes. the user acquisition is mostly driven by SEO. And then, word of mouth and direct traffic is also, important.
Does it concern you कि एक होता ना कि एक्टिव यूज़र है मेरा और वो बिल्ट है और वो मेरा ही यूज़र है और मैं उसको वैल्यू देता रहूँगा, वो मेरे पास रहेगा. sort of माइक्रो सर्विस प्रोडक्ट्स या एपलेट प्रोडक्ट्स जो होती हैं उसका, जिसमें बस कंज्यूमर SEO पे आ रहा है, देख रहा है, यूज़ कर रहा है और आगे निकल रहा है, उसमें डज इट हैव अ कंसर्न यू कि यार I'm sitting at the whim of one platform or the other. So either socials, जिसके थ्रू मैं I'm funnel का वो एक हिस्सा है, या मैं SEO, तो Google, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, इनके ऊपर मैं constantly वो हूँ. If anything changes there, suddenly my life becomes hell.
Yeah, like that's been a thing, like top of mind for me for since we started, and since we clearly saw our reliance on Google. So there were many years where marketing goal ek ye bhi tha ke to end our reliance or on Google, or actually to reduce. You can never be independent of Google. And Google will also, like over the last 13 years, we have seen them make drastic like changes to their search algorithm, for example, as well. But as long as you are providing value to your customers who are looking for a service that you offer, it's not a problem that is worth worrying about, because Google is pretty fair, and it's a well documented space on how to compete on ranking on Google.
I want to talk about the evolution of AI that's happened recently, and that's really exciting and worrying a lot of people. For designers, for example, वो परेशान है कि यार पता नहीं अब तो AI सब कुछ AI हो जाएगा. एटलीस्ट जो लो वैल्यू सर्विसेज में फ्रीलांस पे लोग थे वो कह रहे हैं कि व्हाट, लाइक विद AI पोटेंशियली रिप्लेसिंग अ लॉट ऑफ रिडंडेंट सेम टाइप की चीज़ अगैन एंड अगैन, तो पता नहीं हमारी रिक्वायरमेंट रहेगी या नहीं रहेगी. इसको मैं दो एंड से सवाल पूछूंगा आपसे. पहला ये कि बिकॉज यू आर इन द डिज़ाइन स्पेस एंड डिज़ाइन इज़ वन ऑफ द मोस्ट टॉक्ड अबाउट use case of AI at this point in time with the mid journeys of the world and so on. What are your thoughts? Like, what are you looking at in terms of के आने वाले वक्त के अंदर आपने AI को इंटीग्रेट करना है, नहीं करना, क्या चेंजेस आप इन्विजन कर रहे हैं यूज़र बिहेवियर में, जिसके लिए आपको शायद पोटेंशियली रेडी होना पड़े, कंसिडरिंग के बहुत सारे जस्ट हैव अ कॉन्वर्सेशन विद an AI app, a company based in Islamabad, very young, 2 साल, उन्होंने यही किया कि उन्होंने वो बहुत सारे AI portraits, AI design, AI this, AI that की वो apps बना दी हैं, like millions of downloads, crazy, right? And तो वहाँ पर आपको नज़र आता है कि अच्छा there is another at least एक फैट तो at least आया हुआ है, और वो फैट जो है वो ड्राइव तो कर रहा है लोगों को, वो सस्टेन कितना होता है, दैट्स अ बिग क्वेश्चन मार्क. और दूसरा कि अगेन ये जब आपने गूगल SEO की बात की तो मेरे दिमाग में आया, लॉट ऑफ पीपल आर रियली कंसर्न, मार्केटर्स आर रियली कंसर्नड कि पोटेंशियली द यूज़र बिहेवियर वेयर आज तक मैं हर चीज़ जाता हूँ, जाके गूगल करता हूँ एंड आई गेट अ सीरीज ऑफ आंसर्स, potentially if that is replaced by me talking to a personal assistant and the personal assistant just sort of deciding what it wants and giving me one output, and unless मैं उसको कोई alternate prompt नहीं देता तो वो output ही मैं उसको आगे ले लेता हूँ, right? That's what most people do. पहली चीज़ लेते हैं वो आगे निकल जाते हैं. तो that just might change the very foundation of how advertising works, and obviously for Google even that's a big question mark, क्योंकि उनका सारा bread and butter ही वही है. और वो जो है, लेकिन उन्होंने इसमें आना भी है, क्योंकि ये नहीं करेंगे तो वो बिंग आगे निकल जाएगा या 2 और सर्विसेज आ जाएंगी और वो आगे निकल जाएंगी. तो व्हाट आर योर थॉट्स ऑन दैट?
So इसमें initially at the start you mentioned के जब AI आई तो people were worried about, designers and marketers were worried about के it would take their jobs. If we were to step back and look at our niche, online design tools, हमारे ऊपर भी यही criticism तो नहीं but concern होता था कि they are democratizing design. अब जो प्रोफेशनल डिज़ाइनर्स हैं ये उनकी जॉब्स ले रहे हैं. बट वी हैव एक्चुअली सीन द ऑपोजिट हैपन इन द सेंस के ऑन आवर मार्केट प्लेसेस और इवन एज आवर यूजर्स, अ फेयर बिट ऑफ आवर यूजर्स आर एक्चुअली स्मॉल शॉप्स दैट मेक डिज़ाइंस ऑन पोस्टर माई वॉल, and they're, you know, perfectly sufficient for end users. उनको उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा, you know, artistic like features nahi hote, but they are good enough for the end user. So they end up using, you know, our tools instead of Photoshop or very pro tools to pump out designs very quickly, you know, to different customers. So, you know, there's always an opportunity. You just have to keep evolving. On the AI side, it's very interesting space. Kafi zyada hype hai, or, you know, and if you look at the actual like useful, like number of useful products that you can use today, that set is actually, you know, much smaller. But you know, that said, like we're very excited about the AI space because, you know, like we have millions of designs in our system, and we are working on you know, like training our own model, you know, just to see if we can, you know, how we can like make use of this generative AI technology. As far as the threat to Google and the impact on marketing, it's going to be, you know, a moving landscape, and it's going to be, you know, we're in the same boat as everyone else.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a very interesting ride that we're, you know, looking at carefully. Usme ek do options ye hain ke, you know, if we mention, you know, the top competitor to Google at this time, which is ChatGPT, you have the ability to integrate with ChatGPT. So you can offer, for example, Poster My Wall as a first class, you know, option inside of ChatGPT. So that's a marketing opportunity or a funnel that, you know, you can build on, you know, which people are looking at. And open opportunities to aayenge is tarah ki. Again, it's going to be a moving landscape, and you just have to, you know, stay on top of it.
Makes sense. Did you guys move from web to mobile apps?
So yeah, that's a very interesting topic. Because of the small size of the team, we have been able to launch on Android, but iOS is very strict about its requirements. Okay. And it sort of, you know, requires us to make our own iOS app, which we haven't invested in yet, but we are working on it.
Isn't there like a React or something that can do a bit of both?
There is, but even with that, iOS is fairly picky.
Okay.
And we have a large website which was built pre-React. So all the new parts are in React, but there's a lot of areas that we can't just offer or port.
How much of the user base is now on Android versus the web?
So that's an interesting question because it varies a lot from country to, you know, country. In our top selling, you know, markets like, you know, like developed countries, the majority of paying users are still on laptops. But the Southeast Asian countries or the developing economies over the years have actually not dwarfed, but overtaken a lot of the developed economies just in terms of traffic. Conversion rates unke achhe nahi hai because they aren't used to paying money. But so all the traffic that we see from these countries are mobile first. A lot of these are users whose main device is a mobile phone. So it's lopsided. You know, some of the markets that matter more are still using computers, but some of these emerging markets, which will hopefully be, you know, more important in 5 years down the road, are on mobile first.
Do you think you'll be launching an iOS app anytime soon?
Yes. Yeah.
Would that work on iPad as well?
Yes. Yeah. We will. You know, iPad will be a focus. Again, numbers ke agar hum dekhein, the iPad is a very small percentage. Most people still, you know, prefer to use the iPhone because that's the device they have in their pocket or in their handbag all the time. But yeah, it'll be across the board.
Is there a redesign required for iPad? या आप same को थोड़े से tweaks के साथ multiple devices में launch कर सकते हैं?
This was a redesign would have been required like 5 or 6 years ago, but over the years Apple has become more open to different design, you know, languages. Pehle they were very strict, but yeah, a redesign will not be required, thankfully.
Why do you think why do you think iOS was not a focus for you guys? I would have assumed that would have been a focus maybe 7-8 years ago when everybody was getting into applets. More importantly, at least 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
क्योंकि आजकल के टाइम पे कंज्यूमर एक्सपीरियंस देखो ना मैं तो just quickly just sort of app store में गया जाके मैं वो किया. We use Canva as a small business, and मेरा user experience generally ये कहता है कि when I use an applet on my laptop and if there is no corresponding iOS device, iOS sort of app. Somehow बहुत fickle सी बात है, but somehow मेरा back of the mind है मेरा ये आता है कि you know what, like this product maybe isn't good enough, that they're not available on an app. And second मेरा उस पे आता है कि particularly for cloud based things I want things on the go. So if I've created something on the web, I would like कि मेरी device पे भी वो available है, उसको मैं थोड़ा tweak वगैरह भी कर सकूँ, I can quickly work on it. Why was that not a more pressing initiative?
Yeah. No, from day one, we have supported mobile in the sense that you can go to postermyworld.com on Chrome in your browser or on Safari on your iPhone, and everything will work.
Okay.
So you are able to make changes on the go or buy designs on the go and everything. So that we've made sure, you know, always works. It was just, you know, again, working with a small team, you need to pick your battles. We were seeing, you know, decent, you know, usage on laptops, but yeah, iOS is long overdue. We'll be getting to that.
Interesting. Thoda sa, I'm going to expand the conversation. You guys are a product business out of Pakistan, which is a rarity on its own. First of all, because you're so focused on this, कि बंदा खुद से अपने जैसा ढूंढ लेता है ना, तो are there a lot of folks like you who are running successful product businesses out of Pakistan, and you know, it does not necessarily have to be Lahore, Islamabad, Lahore, Karachi, and or Peshawar, Pind Dadan Khan, wherever.
So I've been around for, you know, a while, in the sense that in 2010, and when we, you know, more importantly in 2014, when we started interviewing people, us time pe, you know, all the experienced people that came in for an interview were all from services backgrounds. Us time pe, like, product ki background wala banda dhoondna impossible tha, which is part of the reason why, you know, historically I've hired fresh grads. Because unme, you know, you can instill that work culture or the style that a product company needs.
What's the difference between the style of a services guy and a product guy?
So in a lot of, again, I don't want to, you know, make them sound bad or anything, but like business needs ye hoti hai for a services company in some cases to just, you know, like finish the, you know, like the project and hand it over to the client. Long-term thinking utni nahi hoti. Innovation ki bahut zyada kabhi zarurat nahi hoti. Again, it's an 80-20 thing. 20% of, you know, large projects will be very focused on innovation, but the vast majority of work is simple, you know, like Shopify ko ye customize kar diya, WordPress ko ye customize kar diya. So, you know, the people who were working in this 80% of the area and that we interviewed, we realized that, you know, like they were very used to finding quick solutions off of Google and you know, using them in the code, which would be, you know, create problems down the road. Whereas, you know, an engineer or a product manager on the product side, we would need people who were a lot more autonomous in their thinking, in their problem solving solutions. And again, having a very strong craft when it came to coding. So even in our, you know, for example, our interviews and tests for engineering, we don't require any particular programming language. Our focus bahut zyada problem solving pe hota hai. Okay, you know, like can this person think around a problem or think through, you know, through a problem. So we focus on problem solving, and, you know, and good craft is a thing, is a focus.
Right. Again, so have you found other product companies in Pakistan?
Yeah, so I was coming to that. Usme yehi hai ke initially we, you know, we didn't used to like see a lot of like people who had worked at product companies, but in recent years we have started seeing, you know, more people. It's been great watching, you know, the local startup ecosystem well, not thrive, but at least variety it has started. Right. And there are, I know of a few, I forget their names, but there are a few shops in Islamabad who are actually working in the social media marketing space as us as well. Ek social media network for work hota tha, I forget their name as well. They were like pretty big as well. They were based in Islamabad. And then we have a lot of like local product, you know, based companies as well. I wish there were a lot more, product companies that were focused on international clients or international users than, focusing on the Pakistani market, because I feel that's a lost opportunity.
पाकिस्तान में जो स्टार्टअप्स का बूम एटलीस्ट नैरेटिव में आया है पिछले 3-4 साल में, उसमें लार्जली फोकस इस पे रहा है कि यार हम पाकिस्तान में पाकिस्तानियों के लिए क्या प्रोडक्ट्स बना सकते हैं, चीज़ें बना सकते हैं, सर्विसेज बना सकते हैं. मैं जनरली आई एम अ somewhat of a critic of that idea, largely because Pakistan, being a developing country, you don't have the margins required, you don't have the fiscal space required कि जिसमें आप कोई बहुत massive amount of efficiency drive करें तो वो valuation game में आप जा सकते हैं, right? So consumption driven, again मैं हर दफ़ा almost every time I talk about a startup, तो मैं even करीम की example देता हूँ, which is by and large our biggest success story, being a Pakistani founder. But even for them, Pakistan is their worst market, and they use that as a number to prop up the valuation game. But by and large, आपकी जो revenue है peanuts है, और वो largely loss ही बनाती है आखिर में. And that should really tell you something about the Pakistani market. Unfortunately, it didn't. And so a lot of people, particularly those based out of Pakistan, started building in Pakistan, hoping कि हम भी उसी pace of growth से, जिस pace of growth से करीम ने grow किया, हम grow कर जाएंगे. Kareem model is not bad. I don't mind it at all. You test Pakistan as a training ground, and then you launch globally. That's fine. But Kareem had that advantage of their team, having that global network connectivity, so on and so forth. On the other hand, अगर मैं आपकी जैसी प्रोडक्ट की बात करूँ कि यार आप ग्लोबल मार्केट में इतनी अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ हैं, आप उसके लिए बिल्ड सर्विसेज डिजिटली, while sitting in Pakistan, just the cost overrun, the margin is right there, right? के engineering margin and so on and so forth. वहाँ पर फोकस ज़्यादा आता नहीं है. अगर वो आता भी है तो उसके ऊपर वो जो नॉर्मल क्रिटिक मिलता है वो ये मिलता है कि यार हमारे पास ग्लोबली कंपेटिटिव टैलेंट ही एग्जिस्ट नहीं करता. विच आई कैन अगेन, चलें, व्हाट आर योर थॉट्स फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल कि पाकिस्तान से बैठ के, आपके केस में अपसाइड डेफिनेटली ये थी, went to Carnegie Mellon, you had a co-founder who was not sitting in Pakistan. So that just does make it easier कि ड्राइव हो रहा है फ्रॉम आउटसाइड ऑफ पाकिस्तान, तो आपको कॉन्स्टेंटली आवाज़ आ रही है कि एग्जैक्टली रिक्वायरमेंट्स क्या हैं, ये क्या है, वो क्या है, एटलीस्ट इन द स्टार्ट. बट व्हाट आर योर थॉट्स ऑन दैट?
आई एम as surprised as you are, at the lack of companies that are focused on, international users or going international and not focusing on Pakistan. Focusing on Pakistan is not a bad thing, but I feel companies, that build products for the local market should keep the international market in their mind so that they can repackage and sell it for, the international market.
Right.
And I'm again mystified at the, the lack of companies that are focused on this, because I disagree that there's a lack of talent that can compete internationally and build products. Given the right culture, given the right guidance and given the right focus, we can, be as good as engineers from any other country or marketers. So वो एक है. And again, having a co-founder अब तो बड़ा आसान हो गया. आप लाहौर में बैठे हुए एक Delaware LLC आप खोल सकते हो, and you can get access to everything, and you can start running a US business with access to
लीगल तो चले आपका हो जाएगा. बट एक होता है ना, देखें जिस तरह मेरे दिमाग में इसकी सोल्यूशन ये आती है कि आई मे बी डोंट एक्सपेक्ट अ पाकिस्तानी किड जो फास्ट से ग्रेजुएट किया वो यहाँ से बैठ के उसका एक्सपोजर ऐसा होगा कि उसको एग्जैक्टली पता है कि इस वक्त सिलिकॉन वैली में कौन सी प्रोडक्ट मैं करूँगा तो वो एक्साइटिंग होगी. बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैंड इन हैंड होती हैं. हैविंग द राइट आइडिया जो कि एक्साइटिंग हो, जिसको मीडिया भी उठा ले तो वो ग्रो भी कर जाता है उस तरह की इकॉनमी में. बट देन आई सी अ ह्यूज, जिस तरह आपने मेंशन किया, मेरे अपने भाई सारे फास्ट के ग्रेजुएट्स हैं, 99-01 बैचेस के. 95 या 99% of all of their class fellows are sitting either in Germany or in the US, in Canada. And because these guys went in early, जो 2010 वाला टाइम था, देर ऑल फेयरली सीनियर इन वेयरएवर दे वर्किंग, राइट? मुझे ये फील होता है कि ओवरसीज पाकिस्तानीज ने अपने आप को डिस्कनेक्ट कर लिया जो उस टाइम पे गए थे ना, बिकॉज दे कुड बी दोज एक्टिवेटर्स जो कि आइडिया पे फोकस करें, स्ट्रक्चर पे फोकस करें कि यार मैंने स्टेप्स क्या बिल्ड करने, वो चीज़ें मिसिंग हैं पाकिस्तान में. एट द एंड ऑफ द डे एक्सपोजर नहीं है ना यहाँ के इंजीनियर का, वो बहुत चीज़ बना सकते हैं, बस उसको डायरेक्शन ही नहीं है. तो डायरेक्शन हैज़ टू कम फ्रॉम समवेयर अब्रॉड. और उसमें आप गोरे पे वेट करते रहेंगे तो वो तो कहीं ना कहीं आप मास्टर्स करने गए तो कोई पर्सनल कनेक्शन निकल आया, उससे आपने बिल्ड कर लिया. पाकिस्तानी could play that role, but a lot of the Wapistanis as well, you know, there are people, Atif Awan, folks like those, जिन्होंने आके consumption based businesses में invest किया, consumption based businesses को वो आगे लेकर गए, rather than ऐसी products पे focus करते जो कि eventually American market में compete कर सकते हैं.
Yeah, so yeah, a few points. When I was a student, I remember, you know, one of the first websites that I used to, well, a website that I used to frequent to was TechCrunch. And that was, you know, for those who don't know, it covers the Silicon Valley and the startup culture in the US. So वो एक inherent, you know, sense develop हो गई हुई थी of what is a good product, what is a product, how, you know, the difference between selling atoms versus electrons. पाकिस्तान जैसे मुल्क के लिए, पाकिस्तान जैसी इकोनॉमी के लिए, everyone should be focused on selling electrons, you know, online services.
Explain that.
So atoms are physical products that you can sell. So and electrons are digital services that you can sell. Again, like given Pakistan, all the infrastructure, if it's on the cloud, it just makes sense for you to be able to. It's just easier to get a product that is selling electrons off the ground and in front of customers. You don't need raw material. All you need is a laptop, internet, and people. Where we are lacking right now, I think it's a very good point, is a lack of product thinking. But I think, you know, we're on the up in the sense that, again, I've been hiring for over a decade now. पहले प्रोडक्ट डिज़ाइनर्स का कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं होता था, लाइक प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर्स तो दूर की बात है, you couldn't even find people who could connect design with the product. Now I feel, you know, that space is actually very vibrant. There are very passionate people working in that space, and it's a good place. You know, it's a good pool of people that you can hire. Obviously, बहुत छोटा है, but it's there. I'm seeing a similar thing happening in the product manager space as well. And, you know, all this takes time. अभी जो startup history है पाकिस्तान की, जो startup ecosystem है, it's very nascent. It's very small. अभी आप, you know, if you look across the border, India is not known for innovation at this point. They don't have startups or, you know, large companies or product-based companies. They are still known
for services.
For services. So it's a natural evolution. But yeah, I think the mandate needs to be set that, you know, focus on international service, you know, like product-based opportunities, because it's a big lost space.
Makes sense. In terms of talent, have you been impacted by the recent devaluation in terms of कि जितने भी मैं लोगों से बात करता हूँ कहते हैं यार, या तो क्वालिटी जिस बंदे पे हमने फोकस किया, क्योंकि इन्वेस्टमेंट है ना एट द एंड ऑफ द डे, व्हेन यू आर हायरिंग समवन, जैसे मैं ज़्यादातर फ्रेश ग्रेजुएट्स हायर करता हूँ, मैं उसके ऊपर इन्वेस्ट करता हूँ 2-3 साल में, उसका वो कल्चर पूरा डेवलप करता हूँ जिसमें वो ही कैन वर्क ऑटोनमसली एसेंशियली, राइट? बट देन डाउन टर्न आता है, एक पॉइंट पे लोग कहते हैं कि देखो जी तुम तो डॉलर पैक्ड मार्केट में हो, तुम्हारा तो गुड सीन है, बट वो गुड सीन मेरे, अगर मैं क्वालिटी टैलेंट बना रहा हूँ तो उस क्वालिटी टैलेंट को एक्सेस भी है ग्लोबल मार्केट्स का, और उसकी वजह से चर्न बहुत ज़्यादा हो रहा है कि जिसमें वो छोड़ रहे हैं, वो दुबई जा रहे हैं, वो यूएस जा रहे हैं, वो मास्टर्स वन वे और देयर मूविंग आउट. आइदर दैट और टैलेंट की जो अवेलेबिलिटी है, डेवलप्ड टैलेंट की अवेलेबिलिटी इतनी कम है कि आप टैलेंट डेवलप करते हैं 2 साल के अंदर और वो सडनली अनकम्पेरेटिव हो जाता है, बिकॉज वो मार्केट में लेफ्ट राइट आते हैं और आके डबल ट्रिपल सैलरीज करके वो ले जाते हैं, बिकॉज उनके काम चल रहे होते हैं, उनको दे जस्ट नीड टू गेट द जॉब डन एज सून एज पॉसिबल, विच इज़ प्रॉब्लमैटिक बिकॉज स्पेशली सर्विसेज इंडस्ट्री में तो देयर इज़ एन इकोनॉमिक मॉडल, एंड द ओनली वे टू ग्रो इज़ दैट इकोनॉमिक मॉडल वेयर यू कैन से कि भाई मैं बाहर जाऊँगा, मैं जाके नोबडी केयर्स कि जी हमारा ब्रांड इतना अच्छा तो नहीं है कि हम कहेंगे देखें जी आप इंडिया से करवा रहे हैं, मैं आपको इंडिया से क्वालिटी में बेहतर रिसोर्स ला के दूंगा, आप मुझे बस वही पैसे मुझे दे दें. आपने compete करना है कि यार आप इंडिया से करवा रहे हैं $3,000 दे रहे हैं, $4,000 दे रहे हैं, मैं आपको 3,000 में कर दूंगा, राइट? बट वो जो मार्जिन कॉल आपने बनानी है उसके लिए आपके पास एम्पल सप्लाई होनी चाहिए ताकि रेलेवेंट प्राइसिंग के अंदर मैं उस पूरी सप्लाई चेन को कनेक्ट कर सकूँ, जो कि रिसेंट टाइम से बहुत डिफिकल्ट हो गया बिकॉज सप्लाई कम थी तो ऑटोमेटिकली उसकी एक सप्लाई साइड इन्फ्लेशन आ गई और वो the economics were not very conducive for growth. Did you face similar problems?
Yes. So 3-4 years ago, we used to compete with people going for a master's. In most recent years, ये जो आपने बात की है, people getting hired directly while sitting here, from companies mostly in Europe and a little bit in the US as well. So even अगर लोग physically भी बाहर नहीं जा रहे, you are still having to compete with foreign companies who are hiring directly here. It's a good sign for talent here. For product-based companies, it's also a problem, but it's a very big problem for services-based companies because again, उनका एक economic model होता है and they need to be able to compete. So yeah, we have been affected. पहले कभी ऐसे नहीं होता था कि if someone accepted an offer, they didn't end up showing up. But in the past few years, a lot of people have just, told us, oh, I got an offer from a German company or, so, like we're just going to work from home for them there.
Work from home and remote work, do you think has increased post-COVID? In terms of Germany से directly hired to Pakistan? बिकॉज उससे तो आप कम्पीट कर ही नहीं सकते ना, बिकॉज वो जो आपको सैलरीज ऑफर कर रहे हैं वो कर रहे हैं, उससे तो पाकिस्तानी कंपनी वर्चुअली इम्पॉसिबल हो जाता है. लोकल कंपनी को आप कर रही है, आप कहते हो यार मुझे बताओ ऑफर क्या है, मैं थोड़ा सा उससे अप एंड डाउन कर लेता हूँ. बट यू थिंक दैट हैज़ इंक्रीज्ड सिंस कोविड एज द वर्ल्ड हैज़ sort of opened up to the idea that it's fine, like I don't care where you're working from as long as your talent is good?
Yeah. So COVID, the catastrophe or the calamity it was, did help in normalizing remote work. COVID se pehle I was never opened to having people work remotely on their team. It wasn't just a concept that you thought of, right? अगर कोई इस्लामाबाद या किसी और लाहौर से बाहर भी किसी ने अगर if they applied, requirement होती थी that you would be relocated to Lahore, we'll help you do that, but you would still have to work from the office 5 days a week. After COVID, we ourselves are following a hybrid model where people are only required to come in 3 days in the office, and then they can work from home for the rest of the few days. और कुछ लोग हैं जो कि लाहौर में नहीं, and they can work from home as well. So I think वो एक अच्छी चीज़ है, that has उसकी acceptance अच्छी चीज़ है, बुरी भी चीज़ है. Hiring के point of view से flexibility बहुत आ जाती है. I am now more open to really focusing on talent than their actual physical place. So that helps, especially small companies in hiring. But it also makes retention challenging as well. Usme retention bhi and productivity as well. Because not everyone can be productive while working from home. So that's a challenge. And then ye wali jo cheez hai ke companies from abroad just swoop in with a better package, and then they just take away their top talent without actually so the brain drain is happening physically and is digitally as well.
Interesting. Do you think, and this is a critique that's coming recently by some of the more aggressive companies, जो कि जब से 2018 का डॉलर पैक टूटा है तो IT इंडस्ट्री में एक जान आई है, जिसके बाद से some players here or there have started to be a lot more aggressive in the way that they're growing. And there is a critique कि जो आप लोगों की जनरेशन थी ना, जो 2000 से 2010 के दरमियान पढ़ के निकल गए, वो बहुत complacent थी in a way that they were dealt a difficult hand. I'm not gonna lie. Brand Pakistan was very bad, terrorism and politically, and then Osama bin Laden randomly pops up one day and you're just like, what the hell? साथ load shedding चल रही, so things weren't easy, right? Anyway, आप एक तरफ से problem solve करते थे, वो दूसरी नई problem में merge कर जाती थी. But simultaneously, and again मैं इसमें हमेशा हवाला देता हूँ कि systems के एक senior leadership ने on a podcast gave me a very interesting insight where he said, you know, India में businessmen got into IT business, had nothing, close to nothing to do with core programming or IT at all. They were people जिनको business करना आता था, and they saw IT as just another thing. अगर businessman है, वो pharmaceutical में घुस रहा है, he doesn't have to be a chemist, he'll hire chemists, right? So they knew how to scale, they had the thirst for it. Pakistan में by and large, the people who came in and created these sort of smaller enterprises were mostly engineers जिनकी total जो life के goals थे वो ये थे कि यार मैं I would have made it अगर मैं माइक्रोसॉफ्ट में जॉब कर लूँगा बाहर जाके, और मैं पूरा करियर माइक्रोसॉफ्ट में गुजार दूँगा और मुझे स्टॉक ऑप्शंस मिल जाएंगे और एक अच्छा सा घर मुझे रेडमंड में मिल जाएगा, एंड आई विल बी हैप्पी. उसी के कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग जो पाकिस्तान में रहे, उन्होंने कहा कि यार ठीक है, हम जॉब कर रहे थे, जॉब से हमने आपके केस में प्रोडक्ट, बहुत सारे केस में सर्विसेज, हमने सर्विस कंपनी बना ली, प्रीमियम बड़ा अच्छा है. सो आपको एक पूरी वो नज़र आती है कि ऑडी होगी या मर्सिडीज़ होगी, इधर 2 कनाल का DHA का घर होगा या 5-8 कनाल, डिपेंडिंग ऑन इंटरेस्ट कैसा है, कि वो एक फार्म हाउस होगा, यू नो एक अच्छी सी बड़ी सी गाड़ी रैली शैली के लिए होगी, या जो भी आपका इंटरेस्ट है वो एक इंटरेस्ट पूरा हो जाएगा, एंड धंधा चलता रहेगा. यू नो सो कैप एट 200, एनीवेयर बिटवीन 50 से 200 के दरमियान हम फ्लक्चुएट करते रहेंगे, काम चल रहा है, और यू नो एंड आपसे भी मैं बात कर रहा हूँ. तो वन वे यू कैन से यू नो आई वांट टू मेक श्योर कि आई कंट्रोल द प्रोडक्ट, आई कंट्रोल दिस. सम वुड आर्ग्यू कि वो शायद शार्क मेंटालिटी मिसिंग है, जिसकी वजह से, एंड आई एम नॉट नेसेसरली सेइंग कि लॉट ऑफ दीज प्लेयर्स आर डूइंग अ पुअर जॉब, दे हैव अ ग्रेट बिजनेस, they're making good money, they're taking care of their talent. Recently I spoke to someone else, again LUMS graduate, 2002 के आसपास ही थे वो. उनका भी यही था कि मेरा ख्याल है उनकी 100 लोगों की कंपनी है, 20 साल हो गए उनको कंपनी 2002 से चला रहे हैं, और उनका यही था कि जी हम बहुत नीच में काम करते हैं, हम बहुत ख्याल रखते हैं सबका, हमें समझ नहीं आ रही हम किस तरह से ग्रो करें, बस हम उसमें खुश हैं. What are your thoughts? How would you answer that critique, you know, of maybe you being at the forefront of the industry need to be a lot more aggressive in your approach now that we're at a time where the economics have started to favor you. The dollar will always favor the export, courtesy of the latest IMF agreement, जिसमें वो अब तो खैर वो जो लास्ट डार साहब ने आके 10 महीना और करने की कोशिश की थी, अब तो बाय एंड लार्ज अंडरस्टैंडिंग भी हो गई है पॉलिसी मेकर और उसमें क्या डॉलर को कंट्रोल नहीं करना, एक्सपोर्ट्स को प्रमोट करना है. एंड देन एक ओवरऑल सोसाइटी में भी एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग आ गई है ना कि डिजिटल विल बी आवर सैल्वेशन. सो इवन क्वालिटी टैलेंट जो है वो अब कंप्यूटर साइंस की तरफ जा रहा है. ओवरऑल एक आपको वहाँ पे पुश नज़र आ रही है. डू यू थिंक you could be more aggressive and you choose not to be?
Yeah, so there are many thoughts around this. Ek to, you know, something that, like, there are a few fundamental ingredients that are missing, you know, which I feel are the causes of what you're describing. एक तो अगर हम बिल्कुल हिस्ट्री में जाए ना, थोड़ी सी जो like socialist, you know, एक movement थी where, you know, the state was demonized and making money was sort of, you know, like demonized, you know, so वो एक baggage एक चलता आ रहा है, which is, you know, like
somehow dirty feeling होती है. Dirty feeling होती है कि यार हाँ मैं पैसे कमाने के लिए एक धंधा करता हूँ. हालांकि भाई करता हूँ तो अच्छी बात है. हाँ,
exactly. So we fail to realize, or we fail to acknowledge that it's these, you know, state or these large companies that will, you know, take people out of poverty.
Yeah.
As an example. एक वो factor है. एक missing ingredient that I saw at Carnegie Mellon when I was there, कि, you know, there were actually offices of Google and other companies on the campus working on projects with their business schools or with, and not just with the engineering schools, you know, working with relative schools. So वो एक और you know, similar concept है Silicon Valley में, उसको adult supervision कहते हैं कि, you know, जब like technical founders बना लेते हैं, they bring in, you know, a foreign, you know, like CEO, a business, you know, man in a suit. Eric Schmidt था Google के लिए, and there are other examples to really scale up the business, जैसे आप कह रहे हो.
Right.
हमारे जो men in a suit हैं उनको tech का experience नहीं है अभी, right? But again, I think the groundwork, well, not the groundwork, but we are seeing baby steps in that area when, you know, in the last few years, you saw large groups like Fatma Group and others starting to invest in tech, you know, like that businessman actually evaluating tech as, you know, as a possible investment. So that's a good sign. I think that will be a source of, you know, future, you know, business-minded people who are able to come in either as a VC or as a mentor or as an owner and drive growth in existing businesses. So ये दो चीज़ें हैं, you know, which I feel एक और ingredient था which I forgot.
That's all right. But ये आपने बड़ी interesting बात की, man in a suit, you know, build something and then let the man in a suit sort of scale that up.
Yeah.
Do you think you'd ever take a backseat from your own business?
Yeah. I mean, if again the vision aligns, if the goals align, and if at the end of the day it's you know, if it's good for the country's economy and it's good for, you know, we're creating more jobs and it's good for the product, then yes, for sure. But reality ऐसी होती है कि a product, you know, if you really have to scale it, you have to take a lot of like shortcuts or decisions that you wouldn't normally make if you were very focused on the user. You would need to let go of a lot of, you know, users in the pie, alienate a lot of, you know, people. So वो एक चीज़ है.
Right.
But yeah, if the vision aligns.
Beyond poster my wall, I mean, you have एक तो आपके पास experience of building a product and then marketing it and sustaining it, and that's largely a 360-degree scope that you and your company have, and that's very valuable, right? That's missing in Pakistan. Have you ever thought about कि जी one way or the other, चाहे उसका कोई capitalist model हो where I can't do everything myself, I don't have the time, to be very honest, but I can potentially begin to invest or partner or something or the other with other teams where I can help them again reach the scale or take that knowledge and be able to target global markets, चाहे वो मैं परसेंटेज रख के अगेन कैपिटलिस्ट मॉडल हो एंड और मैं कोई कम्युनिटी बिल्ड करूँ ऑफ लोकल फाउंडर्स जो कि ग्लोबल प्रोडक्ट बिजनेसेस के ऊपर फोकस कर रहे हैं और मैं उनसे सीखूँ, मैं उनको कुछ सिखाऊँ. I feel like that community doesn't exist. I feel like product business में, global product business में, you find literally आप झाड़ के ना आपको मिलते हैं, कोई इधर कोई हीरा खामोशी से अपना काम कर रहा है. I remember recently लाहौर में I met this guy, I don't know, gaming company उनकी called, मैं भूल गया हूँ, MM आलम पे उनकी बिल्डिंग है. So मुझे उन्होंने randomly invite किया, saw a podcast or two and they were like, you know, why don't you come over? I was like, मैं बड़ा busy था last year मैं आया था podcast के लिए, and I was like, अच्छा पता नहीं कोई है, मैं तो कभी सुना ही नहीं इनका नाम. खैर I just randomly went there with a friend of mine. अब वो MM आलम पे उन्होंने कोई 6-7 फ्लोर का बिल्डिंग बनाई हुई है और एक वो बिल्डिंग है और इसके सामने वाली बिल्डिंग है और आप हर फ्लोर पे जाते हैं तो इट्स इनक्रेडिबल. ठीक है. और फिर वो 2-3 फ्लोर्स में, और फिर उन्होंने जब चीफ ऑपरेटिंग ऑफिसर से मिलाया तो वो एक रशियन था. उन्होंने कहा जी हमने तो बहुत सारे टैलेंट यूक्रेन और रशिया से हायर किया हुआ, वो पाकिस्तान में बैठ के काम कर रहा है ग्लोबली कंपेरेटिव सैलरीज के ऊपर. उन्होंने मुझे फ्लोर्स दिखाए जी, हॉबिट की जो गेम है वो पाकिस्तान में पूरी बनाई है, हमने बनाई है. मतलब
अमेजिंग.
the story and the infrastructure to prove that story was right there. And they were talking about कि जी हम गेमिंग के अंदर हम मतलब ऑलरेडी 800-900 बंदे पे वो जा चुके हैं, किसी को पता ही नहीं है.
किसी को पता.
Right, and I asked him the same question. I was like, do you know other people who are doing this? नहीं जी हम तो अपना काम कर रहे हैं. Right? The guy is a graduate from Punjab University, design में, something like that. So वहाँ पर मुझे होता है कि यार अगर अब ये बंदा इंडिविजुअली जो कर रहा है ये एक्सेलरेशन तो हो ही नहीं सकती ना. इंडस्ट्री की एक्सेलरेशन इस तरह नहीं हो सकती. अगर आप अपने साइलो में बैठ के अपना तो कर रहे हो, बट वो यूनियनाइजेशन ऑन सम लेवल इम्पॉर्टेंट है बिकॉज दैट यूनियनाइजेशन अलाउज फॉर बेटर पॉलिसी, दैट यूनियनाइजेशन अलाउज फॉर बेटर प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग. टैलेंट का प्रॉब्लम है, वाई डज एवरी कंपनी नीड टू सॉल्व इट इंडिविजुअली? when you sort of unionize, then you identify कि यार हमें X amount of talent चाहिए, let's all pool in our resources and start building that. So have you ever thought about building such a community? Because you're probably one of the oldest, I would say, जो कि इस space में काम कर रहे होंगे, both in terms of experience, you know, and in terms of कि when you started 2002, नहीं?
Yeah,
2006. And in the sense के हाँ, you know.
Yeah, so I was like discussing with a friend who's involved in PSEB or Pasha, and we were discussing, you know, brand Pakistan and how both externally and internally, you know, we need to work on it a lot. Externally, वो आपने बात की थी, you know, पहले के, you know, India को हम, you know, और like services में compete करना. उधर भी actually एक interesting चीज़ हुई है कि a lot of the Indian companies have moved to the enterprise level or have moved up market and have sort of left a vacuum, you know, for us to fill. So there's a very good opportunity, and I think इस साल पाकिस्तान की TechCrunch Disrupt is a very large, you know, conference in the US for startups. So there काफ़ी अच्छी presence थी, and you know, so that work is being done to improve brand Pakistan in the tech space.
Right.
Internally, you know, बहुत ज़्यादा I have been looking for a community that you have just described. Right. And मुझे कुछ नहीं मिला. Maybe even कोई WhatsApp group भी मैं, you know, ढूंढ लूँ कि, you know, like where we can actually share ideas and उस तरह.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, a space where organically, I don't know अभी तक क्यों नहीं हुआ. But that's maybe, you know, a space where organizations like the PSEB or the government can come in and start holding more local events that are focused on, you know, like networking internally in the community, you know, versus rather always looking for clients abroad. So ek wo, you know, community building or talent building or knowledge sharing inside the community. And I think in other spaces, you know, people or influencers like you who bring people from all sorts of backgrounds together. I think, you know, influencers have a role to play in this as well, in bringing people together.
Makes a lot of sense. Jafar, I'm going to wrap this up. We're at the 1 hour, 20 minute mark. But this was super insightful. One of the first product conversations we've done out of 385. So you can see the rarity of this particular industry. But it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I'm excited to see where you take Poster My Wall in the future. Thank you so much for coming in. I'm going to ask you one last question I generally ask all of my guests. You went to the US for your master's at a very prestigious university. I'm sure you travel abroad here and there. But आप वापस आके आपने यहाँ पे एक business setup किया. You've been here since thick and thin. Times have been tough. Most recently, even the most solid people, उनका वो faith challenge हुआ था कि यार पता नहीं यहाँ पर future है मेरे और मेरे बच्चों का या नहीं. जो आपने सारा experience किया throughout your life, उसको मद्देनज़र रखते हुए, if I were to ask you, how do you envision Pakistan of 2050, 27 years from now? How does Pakistan look like to you, knowing all of what you know now, seeing all of what you've seen? What are your thoughts on that?
So if you were to you know, if you were to take data points, आजकल का, and I guess compared to when I graduated, 2006 कह लें, you know, that post-war on terror time. If we look at some things that have improved, you know, within, you know, the space that I've been exposed to or working in, you know, अगर IT industry को आप देख लो, तो you know, it's improved a lot in the sense कि पहले एक ecosystem था ही नहीं, startup का concept नहीं था. मैं बैंक के पास गया था, उन्हें freelancer account का, you know, उनको नहीं पता था. So you know, there have been, you know, the startup ecosystem is there and is showing some vibrancy. So that's a positive. जो government की policies पहले completely unregulated था. Again, the State Bank didn't know about outsourcing or any of that. It was not regulated in 2010 to the extent जो कि अब है, in terms of support and all of that. So that's a good thing. अगर मैं देखूँ higher education and private education, that's, you know, if I compared, you know, the schools that I went to, you know, and compared them to the schools that my kids are going to, or, you know, like Beacon House, अगर मैं compare कर लूँ, it's improved a lot. I know people who've moved back from the US and their kids are going to these schools and they're perfectly happy. So that's encouraging to see. Some things that haven't improved, I guess our passport is still, is still the same, still as worse. Human Development Index की जो चीज़ें हैं, we're still where we were. So there's like good and bad. If in a few words I were, I'd be cautiously optimistic about 2050. Some things are on the rise, but the great multiplier in all of this is geopolitics and leadership. So, that is the multiplier factor where the graph can go up, it can go flat, or it can go down.
So it is random at this point in time, particularly we're in a chaotic time globally. And so projection seems increasingly difficult these days. Jafar, thank you so much for coming in and sharing all that insight. This was super enlightening.
You're welcome. It was great to be here.
For all of you guys, thank you so much for watching. अगर आपको ये एपिसोड पसंद है आप दोस्तों के साथ जरूर शेयर करिए नीचे कमेंट सेक्शन में मुझे जाके बताएं what do you think about building products out of Pakistan. Particularly मुझे पता है freelancing and IT community बहुत ज़्यादा follow करती है. What are your thoughts? Have you ever thought of building products outside of Pakistan for the global audience? क्या मसाइल आते हैं, क्या चीज़ें आपको रोकती हैं जनरली, कौन से ऐसे सवालात हैं जो कि आप आंसर करना चाहते हैं when you think about building for the global audience? Let me know in the comment section below. YouTube वाले लाइक का बटन दबाएंगे, इंगेजमेंट बढ़ेगी, लोगों तक हमारी कॉन्वर्सेशन पहुँचेगी. ऑडियो प्लेटफॉर्म वाले सब्सक्राइब का बटन दबाएंगे, आने वाले एपिसोड्स की आपको नोटिफिकेशन मिलेगी. But anyways, this was Saeed Muzammil Hassan Zaidi. You're watching Thought Behind Things. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.